Ladies and gentlemen, the webcast will now begin. Over to you, Scott.
And thank you very much, Raven. And hello, everyone. My name is Scott Ferguson, and welcome to today's webcast entitled Elevating Legal with AI, Supercharged Contracts and Processes. This event is brought to you by law.com, and it's sponsored by ContractPodAi. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some basic housekeeping items about the webcast console. This event is completely interactive and features many customizable functions. Every window that you currently see, from the slide window to the Q&A panel, can either be enlarged or collapsed. So if you'd like to change the look and feel of your console, please go ahead. If you have a question for one of our speakers today, please enter it into the Q&A widget on your console. That widget is accessible on the left-hand side of your screen where you see the question mark icon. We will try to answer your questions either during the event or as part of the Q&A at the end. And if we do not get to your question, you may receive an email response after today's event. In addition, ContractPodAi would like to let you know that the slide presentation will be available as part of the on-demand version of this presentation, and that'll be published within the next 24 hours at law.com. And now for today's topic and the reason why everybody is here today: elevating legal with AI, supercharged contracts and processes. You've heard it before, generative AI will revolutionize your legal processes. But how exactly can it impact your work today with tangible results? Leading our discussion today to unpack some of these ideas is Atena Riani. She is the Chief Product Officer at ContractPodAi, and she's going to be joined by Katie Passaretti, the Director of Legal Business Solutions at PwC. And with that, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Atena to start.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to speak about generative AI and how we can use the technology to elevate legal processes further. It's hard to believe that it's almost 1 year from the time that OpenAI released their ChatGPT. Of course, large language models history goes well beyond that milestone, but definitely a milestone for technology in terms of adoption of the generative AI and emergence of the use cases that we are seeing in the market. Now, with the technology always comes opportunities and concerns, and we are here to speak about both of those today. Historically, the legal sector has been slower in technology adoption. But with GenAI, we see organizations and people rapidly looking into opportunities for using the technology and creating targeted values. With that, there's always concerns about whether or not AI is going to replace lawyers. And today, we want to talk about that as well. We want to talk about productivity gains and precisions that we're seeing as a result of the projects that we're working on that is in collaboration of AI and human lawyers. And we want to, hopefully by example, show you that AI is not going to replace human lawyers, but hopefully shine some light into those productivity gains and output that show organizations and lawyers who do leverage AI technology might actually replace the ones who don't. So to start the process and start the conversation, we wanted to hear more about you and what is your objective? What are your main drivers to explore GenAI? So we have a poll here. So please go ahead and put in your answers here for us. We have a couple of options here. So are you exploring AI because it's a hot topic? It's sometimes fashionable. We want to talk about it. We want to just make sure that we don't fall behind. Do you consider GenAI a game changer for legal? Are you looking for saving cost? Are there any particular use case that you have in mind that you want to solve with generative AI? Or maybe you have been advised by your organization and C-suite to explore AI and to explore your GenAI strategy. So please go ahead and pick from the options here and let us know what are your main drivers to explore generative AI? So as our audience is putting in their answers, Katie, I know you are on forefront of technology adoption. You speak with customers day in and day out. What is your input and insight on this topic?
Yeah, thanks, Atena. So my team at PwC generally works very closely with general counsels and legal departments. And what we're hearing the most, I mean, really a vast majority of our client meetings for the last 8 months have been some inquiry about GenAI. And what we're hearing the most from those stakeholders is that, in fact, their C-suite is encouraging them to figure out how this could be leveraged or whether it could be leveraged for their teams. But they don't necessarily have that specific use case in mind. It seems to be more of a general feeling of the C-suite that this is a hot topic. It could be a cost savings driver. And they're really pushing all of the other leadership in the company to reach out and start to find solutions that could work for them. So I guess for me, a little bit of a hybrid between these answers, but I'm curious to see what this group says.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, absolutely. We're actually seeing, very similar themes. It is a combination, and we're seeing more and more that organizations and, driven by the C-suite, people want to take a look at what are the areas of opportunities to create that efficiency, really streamline the process. Of course, directly and indirectly, it could, result into some of the cost saving, but it is sometimes a combination of things. So we'll give a little bit more time for our audience to put in their answer. There are a lot coming up.
I think an exciting thing here too is you don't necessarily need a use case in mind, because this technology is so flexible and still changing really literally every day, right? So it really can be built bespoke to what you can imagine in a lot of ways. So I think that is an exciting sort of differentiation between some of the legal technology that we've seen over the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And people start with evaluating how they are doing things today. What are the areas of opportunities, right? And there is that mapping to AI capabilities of what can be solved by AI or not, right? So even if you have some use cases in mind, sometimes you go through that process. A lot of times it's baseline best practice to go through that process to evaluate the best use cases that you can go after. So I'm going to push the results. The results are very interesting, guys. So I'm going to push the results to everyone so that you guys can see as well. So the top of the list from the options, from the answers, by 44%, we're looking at considering GenAI a game changer for legal. And that is followed by 20% with it being hot topic. And, of course, again, like very, very interesting. People are looking for driving cost saving as well. Very interesting. Actually, I do agree with that. Considering GenAI as a game changer for legal industry. Our industry is being interrupted by the generative AI in the positive way. There are so many scenarios that, at ContractPodAi, and in many cases, with partnership with PwC, we will talk about some of those use cases today, that we are looking at areas that is reimagining legal and reimagining contract lifecycle management, and what is the definition of playbooks? What are the definitions of the workflow processes, right? Can we start reimagining those concepts for better and drive operational efficiencies and productivity gain? Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your input here. Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say, I really view it as, game changer, or I like to describe it as like GenAI is going to supercharge legal teams, because I think, as we discussed on the last slide a little bit, I as a lawyer, I don't think lawyers are going anywhere anytime soon, but I really do think that we can reimagine and rebuild what our day-to-day work looks like and focus more on substantive, high-level creative work that, I know I hear from a lot of legal teams that they don't necessarily have time on a day-to-day basis to think about because they're working on a lot of process, admin, documentation work that really can be eliminated, as you're saying, reimagined, and given to this technology going forward.
Absolutely. And that shifts also the legal team's focus from repetitive tasks potentially to more strategic work that they can, offer to the organization. Awesome. So with that, let's actually start looking at and talking about one of the projects that we worked on as a joint effort between ContractPodAi and PwC. This is a live and delivered project through generative AI. And this project was a client, a PwC client, who is a global venture capital fund. And they have over 500 portfolio companies under their umbrella. And they basically had very specific needs for in-depth reporting and analysis for each of their portfolio companies. And that needed to happen monthly and quarterly basis. These were complex legal analysis that were both for legal and accounting department and very critical from financial reporting perspective and strategic business analysis perspective. Now, this process before this project was a manual process, and it required a very resource and time consuming effort, and it was a repeated task that needed to be done by senior legal resources. So our partner PwC came to us with this project, and we jointly started the collaboration and working on the project. Now, Katie, if you don't mind giving us a little bit more detail about what was PwC and the client's objective when we started the project.
Sure. Yeah. So this is a client that PwC has had a long-standing relationship with, and we actually have been part of this manual process that you described of the quarterly review of all of these contracts and related documents, which, as you mentioned, is very time-consuming, involves the highest levels of legal, and is therefore pricey. And isn't just a straightforward extraction, right? It actually involves analysis and logic behind the conclusions that are drawn. And the conclusions are key to our client's business because they really tell them the disposition of the companies that they're investing in on a quarterly basis, and therefore their rights and obligations with respect to each of those companies. So really a key part of their business. The client that we're talking about here is one of those that we were talking about before, where their C-suite really challenged the company as a whole to look into generative AI and deploy it where they can in order to drive efficiencies. So they were very excited and open to really came to PwC with where can we use this technology? You've seen our processes, what can be beneficial? So we sort of targeted this process that we've described to meet a couple of objectives. So, as we discussed, reducing the overall burden and cost of the legal process. So to allow their lawyers more free time to work on other matters rather than this sort of repeatable task. Also, if and when this portfolio of company grows, this will allow them to do this process at, really any scale without having to have additional headcount. This, also will reduce the leverage that they have on their external counsel, which again is a cost and time consideration, as typically sending stuff to outside counsel will slow down the process. And then, as we said, not only extraction, but proving to the client that this analysis and logic and really detailed information can come back from generative AI almost instantaneously. And then I think, Atena, I'll go back to you to sort of detail the solution that we built.
Yeah, and do you see, Katie, these type of objectives in general being similar on other, opportunities and, other projects that you're exposed to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say these general objectives have been top of mind for our clients for years, even before generative AI. As I mentioned before, legal teams often come to us that they're overburdened, and that they have high external counsel costs, and they're doing a lot of administrative work. So this is like a common theme that we hear and objectives we're trying to meet. But I think the generative AI gives us a real opportunity to meet those in a new and exciting way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so to solve for the challenge, the solution that we onboarded for this client was our generative AI co-pilot solution at ContractPod called Leah. For each of the portfolio companies, Leah analyzed their interlinked documents. There were a large number of documents for each portfolio companies that was in the scope of the project. And the examples of those documents are investment agreements, shareholder agreements, voting rights, side letters, so on and so forth. So large number of documents, all interconnected. And Leah analyzed it and looked for those critical financial and business information. And those were information such as what is board composition or board. And as we spoke earlier, they had the need for the list of conclusions and other type of analysis that was needed for this project. And so not only we automated these analysis, also engineered the solution for that in-depth, complex, and sequential type of analysis to be driven. So to drive that conclusion, Leah found the relevant information within the document and then applied the framework to drive the conclusions. Also, Leah, in this process, provided the full transparency into the information that was found, where the information was found, and then also what was the thought process and the logic that was applied to it to drive that conclusion, and then also recommendations for her conclusions. This full transparency here resulted in very interesting use cases of output that we observed throughout the process, showcasing what we spoke about earlier in terms of the partnership of AI and human lawyers and how we can really create the maximum efficiency and precision from the AI by that partnership and the combination of AI and human lawyers. So we are going to dive into the details of those scenarios shortly here when we talk about the output of the project. So quickly wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the solution and different aspects of it. So in the Leah solution, we use the discovery module for this level of complex multi-query and sequential analysis. That was the level of modules and feature sets that was needed for covering such complex use case. And throughout the process, we iteratively prompt engineered the use cases and the information that needed to be extracted and conclusions that needed to be driven and tested between PwC and ContractPodAi across this massive interlinked documents to ensure that the accuracy is up to our standards. Now, in general, when using technology, is also important to understand the limitations and the risks that come with the technology and make sure that we solutionize for it. And that is exactly what we did throughout the project using Leah. And I want to highlight a couple of those points. One fact is that the large language models are not a one-size-fits-all scenario. So we know by experience that some of them are better in deep analysis, some of them are better in generating content, so on and so forth. So in order to solutionize for such a complex use case end to end and make sure that we do the analysis of the document, we extract the information, we understand what that information means in the context of the document, we can create the legal framework around it, and then generate a result that is, all going to end be, based on the standard and the requirement that we specify in the project. We needed to take a multi-large language model strategy and bring the best in breed technology models to the technology and solutionize end to end. Number two is that large language models are probability engines. And by nature, there are variabilities in the output, what is referred to as hallucination in AI. So that variability comes with large language models by default, but there are methods from the architecture perspective, from development perspective, from prompt engineering perspective, that we can minimize those hallucinations by incorporating defensive coding, fine-tuning the models using the context and prompt engineering. And we do those careful processes to ensure that the hallucination is minimized as much as possible. And that careful prompt engineering and the processes that was incorporated into the process also ensures a higher precision in the output. Now, the whole process, wanted to dive into the details a little bit and show you guys how the project was tackled. So Katie, if you could please take us through the project steps in more details, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So we wanted to give you, as Atena said, a little more detail around what this looked like on the ground, and give you a sense of what a rollout or an implementation might look like, for maybe a use case that you have in mind, which I think we will discuss some alternative use cases here in a bit as well. But this was approximately a 6-week rollout. And as I mentioned, our team at PwC, the client team, and then Atena's team at ContractPod worked very closely here throughout the process. You can see the handoffs. But to begin, the most important thing, obviously, is knowing where your documents are and what information you're going to be looking for in those documents. So we had the team at PwC who worked closely on this process with the client collect relevant contracts. As Atena mentioned, there were a variety of contract types we collected, investor rights agreements, et cetera. And we also gave some underlying accounting and other financial information that would be important in the analysis. And we highlighted the key fields that would need to be extracted, and then the analysis and conclusions that we would want the generative AI to reach. And we also provided some example answers, as we had done this analysis manually before, of what the output, ideally would look like. So then all that information enabled Atena's team to upload it into Leah and begin building those queries and logic in order to extract the key data points, but also enable the tool to run those queries to come out with the answers we were looking for. So we gave some examples here. Some of the things that Leah was able to do was read the documents and update, what the board composition was, what the appointment rights were, what the votes per share were of the various stakeholders, were there any legal restrictions, when did they come into place, as some of them were time-bound or had other considerations. So it was really able to, look at those complex legal questions and run that analysis. So that was done in this queries and discovery phase, and the document analysis phase. And then I know, Atena, your team of legal engineers took a look at that initial output to do some internal quality assessment and training of those of the queries and the extractions to sort of reinforce that process internally. And then the information was extracted out and provided back to our team at PwC, where the legal SMEs who were familiar with this process and the documents were able to do another quality check for accuracy. And again, additional retraining if needed. At that point, we had an initial output that we were comfortable sharing with the client, and received some client feedback, and took the opportunity to do a little bit of additional prompt refinement. And this is really where you need the client or the people who are running the process to give their view on some specificity. As companies look at things different ways, want the outputs in different formats, might have a specific language that they use to describe items. Different legal teams can analyze provisions different ways, right? So you need that true client touch at some point before you do that final prompt refinement to make sure that the outputs are going to be usable and they can hit the ground running. So that was a quick process. As you can see there, it was about 1 to 2 weeks. And then ultimately, we were able to go live with these models and incorporate the information that was coming out of Leah into the client's workflow and reduce that manual burden. I guess, Atena, anything to add there from the Leah perspective?
So I wanted to highlight that the end-to-end process of the project was 6 weeks, right? So we started the process. It was a rapid and iterative, prompt engineering. And within the first 3 weeks, we used half the scope of the entities to basically build the model. And then, continued from the quality assurance perspective to, increase the precision to highest standard. And very quick turnaround for such a complex use case, both from, extraction, legal analysis, and all of this, the components that we spoke about today. And we were very impressed with ourselves, between PwC and ContractPod, and as a result, the client, by the output that Leah produced, and of course, the quality of the output, the precision of the output, but also the full transparency that Leah, provided to the end user to really act as a legal co-pilot and an assistant to streamline the process and create productivity gains.
Yeah, I'll say
so
on
maybe
that
take a
point
look
about,
at some of the results.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just going to add on that point about the transparency and the outputs. I think, something we didn't necessarily highlight, but that was important to the client and to any, lawyers on the call may be important. Not only did Leah have the ability to give us the conclusions, but it also gave us the supporting information of how the conclusions were reached. So actual references to the documents with citations to the article or section, and then it would sort of describe the logic using those sources of how the answer was reached. So, as we used to say, it shows its work, right? So there's no question of, is this accurate? How did it come to this answer? But you're able to really show to leadership and to your team members, this is the same analysis I would go through, and the conclusion is correct. And yes, with that, I agree. Let's go to the results. So this is a little quick page of just sort of our project by the numbers. So you can see there the total data reviewed. I think it was exactly 217 documents, which was 16,000 pages and almost 4 million words. As we said, the portfolio itself is almost 500 entities, but it was really 20 full entities that were run through that end-to-end process to train the model. You don't need to train it on every, every sort of discrete part of your use case. And from those 20 entities, 600 queries or the fields and the conclusions were evaluated to do the quality checks. And then you can see here the accuracy of above 98%, which would surpass a human-only review. As everyone knows, even humans, unfortunately, aren't 100% accurate. Also, as we mentioned, we were able to get to that accuracy pretty quickly within like 3 to 5 weeks, which thinking about training a new legal team to do an analysis like this likely would take that long to do a full training. So very, very speedy. I think Atena, it might be helpful if you want to talk about how you guys assess the accuracy and how we got to that 98.34% number.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is an iterative process. So basically, the testing is a supervised testing for us to ensure that AI is performing as expected, right? So for every step of the process, we identified the areas of opportunities that the model needed to be fine-tuned for us to increase the accuracy, and then ran it for a new set of data to ensure that it learned, and again, and as an iterative process, did the fine-tuning. Now, wanted to highlight what I mentioned before here in the output, that there were scenarios that were very interesting, showcasing how the combination of AI and our lawyers could actually drive better results. So there were some scenarios that we came across that we first questioned the output of Leah and evaluated it for opportunities for fine-tuning the underlying model. And some of these results showed us that the information in the analysis that Leah provided was actually accurate. So our lawyers on ContractPodAi side and PwC side, after confirming the results, of course, within the documents, changed their initial conclusions after they saw the details and the thought process that Leah incorporated into driving those conclusions. And that was very interesting for us, because in addition to of course, that productivity gain that at a scale, having these type of analysis that are 60 to 80 different type of conclusions that needed to be extracted, and then advanced analysis on things that not only requires extracting the information but connecting them together in the context of the legal use case, and then driving conclusion, as I mentioned before. It required senior legal resources to really address those. And so for automating that kind of process by default results into massive cost saving and productivity gain. And especially for use cases like this, that it needs to happen on the monthly basis, on quarterly basis. It needs to happen repeatedly, and the same thing needs to happen repeatedly. So on top of those advantages that Leah provides to the client, also that thought process and full visibility into the context of the legal documentation and having the legal framework for thought process, it provides that additional assistance. So if a human lawyer in one scenario or the other would actually miss an aspect of it, especially as correlated to legal, right? A lot of use cases, especially on complex analysis, is subject to interpretation also. What are the information that I have in hand? And what are the logic that needs to be applied? And what are the potential conclusions that comes from it? Those different aspects are so important as in this ecosystem to drive a fair and balanced result. And we saw this in action. And that is one of the reasons that I would say that, AI and legal and lawyers, from the precision perspective, from performance perspective, from operational excellence perspective, all goes hand to hand. And, this is a technology to be leveraged for elevating our legal processes and making it even better.
Yeah, I think, and that was a good description of, really showing the collaboration and the iterative process of training the model that happened between, all three parties, and just goes to show, you have to trust in the technology, but, trust but verify, right? So if the outputs aren't maybe what you necessarily expect, do your due diligence, look at the documents, but, as we said, humans aren't always right either. So sometimes technology can even teach us something or show us something that maybe we missed.
Yeah, absolutely. So interested to know more about the perspective of you guys on the call. So let's go back to you in terms of just let us know what are your top use cases that you are looking for using GenAI for. So we have another poll here. If you could please go ahead and choose what is on top of your mind, and what do you think GenAI is going to be more beneficial to you? So we have a couple of options here. Are you interested in authoring documents, and those authoring documents through generative AI could be authoring regulatory notes updates, or let's say you have board of directors memos, case summary, or contracts, any legal documents, right? There are use cases that we are seeing across the market that generative AI could be used for generating those content. Is that something that you're looking for using GenAI for? Are you interested in abstraction or contract summaries, right? So the long legal documents, sometimes as the use case that we spoke about, large number of documents that are interconnected and relevant, and sometimes you need to drive that abstraction and the summary for one document or across different documents. Is that your use case? Contract review and redlining. A generative AI, specifically at ContractPod, we're seeing a massive opportunity to streamline the process for review as a rule-based framework, and really having the review and redlining process streamlined through generative AI. Is that your use case? Are you looking for maybe contract search, or the level of discovery similar to the use case that we spoke about today? It's, you can search the documents, you can search for your contracts, you can search for your content within the contract, or even drive conclusions and look at your obligations across the contract, look at the different risk across the contract. Is that your use case? Or maybe you're looking for a guidance tool or a concierge for your contract negotiations, or a help desk for your policies and procedures. Are you looking for a conversational tool that can help you with bringing that information to surface through a conversational user experience? So please go ahead and select for us what is on top of your mind, and what is the top use case that you think you can use GenAI for. So as people are putting in their answers, what do you think, Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Atena. Yeah, I think these are all exciting use cases. I think really the authoring legal documents is something that people have been clamoring for, generally for years. And prior to GenAI, I just don't think we were there yet. So I really think that is going to be an exciting frontier. For people, I think it's a little bit more of a leap of trust there, right? When you're talking about authoring documents from scratch. A lot of our clients are really exploring, I'll say right now, in the contract summaries bucket. Some examples of like repeatable tasks where you might need contract summaries are, M&A. If you do a lot of M&A work, it might be the same logic and queries you're running for each acquisition. And you need the same summary of key or hot terms coming out of the contracts, right? And that's a very manual process that can be very much accelerated here. Also thinking about just in a lot of my clients' contract workflows, when contracts are going for approval, they're having to draft an executive summary or some sort of summary for the high-level approvers. And that's something that can easily be automated here again, with generative AI, where it can read the contract very quickly and pull out the key terms, put them in the language and the order that the company wants and is used to, and just ship off the contracts for approval, with removing that entire process step, essentially. Atena, what about you? What are you hearing that people are excited about?
Yeah, so it depends on the use cases, right? Because some of these are easier use cases, some of them are more complex, such as contract review and redlining. We see a lot of traction on contract review and redlining, specifically with our redlining module as a gold standard for redlining. So with the LEA framework and having custom modeled and custom framework to be able to redline a document using a generative AI on the customer specific model is showing a lot of value, targeted value. So we actually, of course, that is more complex from the adoption of the use case. So sometimes we see, customers starting with the contract summary and having the concierge and having, authoring some of the legal documents and basically then adopting the review and redlining module, but being able to just imagine document, just giving it to LEA, and then LEA providing a red-lined version of the document based on your rules and standards and trained models, and being able to, as we spoke about transparency, right? Giving you the rationale on not only the redline document, but why did I redline what I redline? Why am I recommending what I'm recommending to you? That is very impressive, and we see a lot of use cases now very rapidly, customers adopting those kind of use cases to create targeted value. So let's actually take a look at what people think. I'm going to push the result to you guys as well, so that you have the visibility to it. So actually, the lead use case is contract review and redlining by 31%. It is exciting to also hear that the audience is looking at those kind of use cases, because it is very, as I said, very targeted, like the productivity gain and negotiations, streamlined negotiations that come as a result of that. That is followed by authoring legal documents. Yeah, generative AI can generate documents. Of course, this is a new capability that we didn't have before. What is, I would also say, very important to consider here is that the authoring of the legal documents in a lot of use cases require your domain specific model as well, because you don't want a general like Google lawyer to bring in like a standard or out of the box formatted documents to you. A lot of organizations, they have their own language, they have their own format, they have their own model of the way that they approach generating content. So having a tool that can help you have your own custom models and being able to author the documents according to your standards and the templates is very important. Are you surprised with the results, Katie?
I'm surprised that they're all relatively close. I'll say, after the two we mentioned, contract summaries and guidance are tied, and then search is very close. So yeah, I think people, how I interpret this is people are excited about all of them, which I understand. Yeah, I think the other thing I'll highlight just from this is, I speak to a lot of clients day on and day out who all of the people in their company come to legal for contract guidance questions all the time, whether it's how do I find a contract, what's in my contract with, X supplier, whatever it may be, right? It's a large part of most legal teams' job is fielding those ad hoc questions through every form of communication. So I think that's another exciting one, based on these results and what I'm hearing, where if people can sort of have a self-service option for that, that's really and truly accurate and quick, I think that'll change a lot of the day-to-day work for folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, Katie. So, guys, if you have, interest in these, use cases, of course, these are part of, some of the out of the box, modules and features and functionalities that Leah has is amongst the large library of use cases and features and modules that we have on authoring side. Being able to do, as I mentioned, redline and review of the contracts, search, concierge for your contract negotiations policies, so on and so forth, and many, many more modules like automating creation of the playbook, so on and so forth. So please reach out to us if you want to have a conversation about your use case, if you want to have a conversation about the applicability of these to your use case, and take a look at some of those. We're happy. We're here to help you with that. So before we jumped into answering some of the questions from you guys, we wanted to wrap up with a couple of takeaways from our experience on what results into a successful project in onboarding of a GenAI project, a GenAI technology. Number one is, this is like any other technology and technology adoption project that, and even more important for GenAI, right? That you need to define your use case and define what are your requirements, and those requirements from different perspective. It could be what you're trying to achieve, what is your precision, accuracy standard, privacy, security, what's your cost, all of those, as part of a requirement. Make sure before you start the initiative, you define what is your use case. And as part of that, define your objectives. We talked about how we approached these use case that we spoke about today, and objective was forefront, and defining the success factor was forefront as well. And we see that a massive contributing factor in terms of the success of GenAI project. Do you agree, Katie?
Yeah, definitely. I think requirements gathering and really being clear about your use case, and related to that, your, currently how much time and effort is being spent on this use case, and then, what your sort of goals for efficiency gains are is really important. Especially when thinking about selling these projects internally or building a business case. If you don't measure something at the beginning, then you can't really report on how, valuable or what the efficiency gains that you gained are. So really important to document all that right up at the beginning.
Exactly. And then when the requirements is, completed and what you're trying to accomplish, evaluate these use cases and make sure that they really are going to be solved using the technology. In this process, I think it's very important to be transparent and honest about it, and basically do the mapping to the AI capability and ensure AI is going to solve the problem that you're looking to solve. And if needed, fail fast and build on success rapidly so that you can showcase the productivity and ROI gains to your organization, and make sure that you're on the right track. And as we spoke many times today, humans still need it to govern AI and to ensure that precision and combat the potential hallucinations and bias, so on and so forth. So be aware of the areas within that process that you can actually solve using AI, and just solve for those repeated tasks or mundane tasks in the way that you can shift your legal focus to more strategic initiatives, but also identify where in that workflow you still need human interaction to confirm the result, to guide AI, and to make sure that you have a successful implementation of GenAI. And finally, I would say, for creating the real value and that productivity gain and operational efficiency that we repeatedly talked about today, always think about the scalability. You could use AI to solve very targeted, problems, but in the scenario we talked about the analysis and generating the report. But when it really it creates that value is when you actually put it in action at scale, and you make sure that it can be consistently used by your users and constituents to create that value in bulk. So with that, Katie, any other comments or takeaways from your perspective?
No, I think number 3 is really a key one. I think always you should be looking at the right tasks in any process going to the right role. So that's really important to still keep in mind, even in a tech augmented process like we're talking about. And I think just something to consider there as well is the types of I don't want to say humans, but the types of employees you might have in the process now might even have to change once GenAI comes into the picture. Or your legal teams might need to be trained on some new items in order to really excel in these new processes. So that's something to really start thinking about as well as GenAI moves into your organization.
Sounds good. Yeah, thank you. So let's actually move on to answering some questions from the audience. So one of the questions here is, how can I use GenAI to show value to my company? I'll take a first stab at it and pass it on to you, Katie. I would say evaluate as we spoke, right? Evaluate your use case. How are you doing the task today? And identify the opportunities for mapping that to the AI capabilities. And it's going for you to showcase the value to your organization. You would need to make it very specific about your organization's understanding what the process is today is going to be important to do that. And then, making sure again that AI is going to solve for that. And make sure it's clear from the scope perspective, from the success factor perspective, and you can showcase the value and iterative process. I would say I would take the approach of showing that value in bite sizes, so that you can build on that success.
Yeah, I agree. I think some of the key takeaways, dovetail with this question well. I think if you want to really show value quickly with an early project, you want to pick something that's scalable so that you can measure, be able to measure the time and effort that a team is spending on that repeatable process, and then project out over time and over that improvement in scale, the long-term savings. Most of the things we kind of have been discussing today are things that have to be done regularly or semi-regularly. So we're not talking about you build it one time and use it one time, right? It's something that's going to be a key part of your team on an ongoing basis. And that's, showing a long-term value. Another way we've looked at this are looking at like projects that have been on the back burner that no one has time to do, and sort of projecting out, with this time savings, here's what we could do with it, right? And sort of start lining those up, which sometimes helps sort of move that needle as well to show, we're not just going to sit on our hands with this extra time that we're gaining, but there's going to be some like tangible additional benefits coming in.
Absolutely. And talk to us and talk to other people that are actually doing the projects, because another thing to consider is that there were complex use cases like this that were on the table for a long time. The technology was not there to solve the problem in the accuracy level that we needed to. Now the technology is unleashing that opportunity. So understanding what other people are doing and how that is showing results. There are people like us that are basically publishing the results in different format that you could use. You could use those data to go to your organization and basically show if that is similar to the use case that you need to target, and basically use success stories to show value. Also, and get the buy-in. Now, it's Katie, we have another question that is very relevant to this. If you could please comment on that. The question is, how can I get buy-in from my company to be able to invest in GenAI?
Yeah, I think, what I've been seeing is companies are sort of going in two different directions. One is the one we've spoken about a lot, which is that, the C-suite is pushing teams to invest in GenAI. They're open, to the technology. And then I think it's really just a straightforward business case like we've discussed. If your company is a little bit more hesitant to invest in GenAI, or just, it really hasn't been on the radar, then you really need to start from step one to sort of build your case for leadership. And typically what we recommend is thinking about building a more a broader responsible AI model for your company. So really starting from step one and building that governance around how will we enable oversight if we bring GenAI in? How will we ensure that we are checking on, current regulations that we are going to comply with all, generative AI and AI regulations that are rapidly coming into the market? How do we make sure that it fits with our security infrastructure, our privacy concerns, that our documents will only be released into environments that we will allow it to be, released into? How do we ensure, fairness in the AI models? There's a list of these items to consider, but I think before you even dive into maybe use cases and business cases, you want to build that governance model that you can show to your leadership and your C-suite to get them comfortable with the fact that, with each new next step that you're going to take on your GenAI journey, that you have that governance model in place to protect the company itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So your executives want to make sure that you have the governance in place, you're using AI responsibly. And then, I would add, it will help a lot if you showcase that you understand the use case and you bring in the right technology to solve for that. And you have the right skill set or plan for bringing in this skill set through education of your people, or the people that you need to onboard to make sure that you can support it. So that those factors we're seeing, it helps a lot in terms of helping for clients to invest in GenAI. Next question is, what should I look for when searching for a GenAI tool? Where would I start? It depends on the use case that you're trying to accomplish and your success factors, right? What are your requirements again? Look at the requirements, especially from the privacy and the accuracy and the security perspective, because that helps a lot in terms of navigating what tool to go to. And we spoke about that today also, that large language models are not one size fit all, right? So you might actually need to incorporate multiple large language models, especially if your use case is enterprise level, and especially if you're looking at solving the larger scale use cases. There are solutions out in the market that bring in the multiple large language models to your use cases. So I would start with looking at what you're trying to accomplish and mapping it to the technology. I think we are at time. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today and talking about GenAI. And we are excited to be in this space and looking forward to communication and further conversations with some of you guys. Thank you, Scott. Back to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and a great conversation today. We want to thank everybody in our audience for joining us. We hope that all this information was useful to you. Once again, thanks to both of our speakers for their insights, as well as ContractPodAi for their support of today's event. As a reminder, there'll be some additional materials for you to download, including the presentation that you saw, and you get a chance to download and read that later. If you missed any part of the presentation, remember it'll be archived shortly at law.com, where you can view it again or refer someone else to it. And while you're on that page, we encourage you to look at some other upcoming and on-demand presentations that we have. Thank you again.